Hi, sleepy souls. You have been turning a problem over in your mind all day, examining it from one side, then another, and still no answer comes. Here is what science has found. The moment you stop trying is often the moment the solution begins. Not because the brain gives up, but because, in sleep, it works in ways the waking mind cannot access. The circuits that narrow and focus during the day open wide in the dark. The brain does not rest when you rest. It reorganizes. It connects. It solves. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Tonight, what you carried here may be lighter by morning, not because the problem changed, but because the part of you that solves will have been working all night without you. The science of that process is quieter than you think, and it has been running for you since the very first night you slept. And now we begin. Let one breath go slowly now. The part of your mind that finds answers is already awake. You only need to stop directing it tonight. The sleeping brain does not go offline. It shifts into a different mode that neuroscientists call offline processing. During REM, the brain replays problems from waking hours, but routes them through different neural pathways. Where the analytical prefrontal cortex dominates during the day, associative regions take over at night. The hippocampus, the default mode network, the temporal lobes. These regions specialize in broad pattern recognition, not narrow logic. A 2023 study in Nature Neuroscience confirmed this shift is not random. The brain preferentially replays emotionally tagged, unresolved experiences, the problems it registered as important but unfinished. The question you carried to bed is already being worked on. Sleep-dependent problem-solving has a name in cognitive neuroscience: incubation. The term borrows from biology, something quietly developing in warmth and darkness before it is ready to emerge. Researcher Ulrich Wagner at the University of Lübeck showed that participants who slept between learning a complex task and attempting a hidden rule were nearly 3 times more likely to find the shortcut than those who stayed awake. Sleep did not just consolidate what they learned. It restructured it. Something in the dark reorganized the pieces into a shape the waking mind had not seen. That restructuring is not passive. It is the brain doing work that wakefulness cannot replicate. The brain during REM sleep is measurably more creative than the brain during waking. REM is characterized by a unique neurochemical state. Acetylcholine rises, while norepinephrine and serotonin drop nearly to zero. This suppresses the logical gating function of the prefrontal cortex and amplifies the brain's capacity to form remote associations. Connections between ideas normally filtered as too unlikely. A 2021 paper in Science Advances found that participants in the hypnagogic state, the twilight just before sleep, solved significantly more creative problems than those who remained awake. The norepinephrine drop is the key. That chemical enforces conventional thinking. When it quiets, the brain tries combinations it would never approve in daylight. Thomas Edison held steel balls in his hands while dozing in a chair. When he drifted into sleep, the balls would drop. The crash would wake him, and he would write down whatever images had surfaced. What Edison had discovered by trial was the hypnagogic state, the transition between wakefulness and sleep, where the brain produces theta waves and loosens the filtering mechanisms that govern waking thought. Salvador Dali used the same technique with a key over a plate. Nikola Tesla reported solving engineering problems in the space between waking and sleep. These men were not being eccentric. They were harnessing what neuroscience would later confirm. The liminal mind is a problem-solving machine. Memory consolidation during sleep is not a passive storage process. The brain actively reorganizes memories during sleep, integrating new information with existing knowledge networks through a process called memory reactivation. The hippocampus, which buffers new experiences, replays the day during slow-wave sleep. The neocortex receives these replays and incorporates them into long-term memory structures. But during the transfer, associations are made. The new memory is not filed in isolation. It is woven into the fabric of everything already known. And sometimes that weaving produces a new thread, a connection that was not there before. The filing is not storage. It is integration. The concept of sleeping on a problem has been studied across cultures, and the finding is consistent. A meta-analysis published in Psychological Bulletin in 2022 reviewed 47 studies across Japanese, German, American, and South Korean cohorts. In every group, participants who slept before making a complex decision showed better outcomes than those who did not. The researchers proposed that sleep allows evaluative consolidation. The brain not only stores options, but weighs them against emotional and experiential data during the night. The morning decision carries processed experience. The night is not empty time between choices. It is the processing itself. Dreams are not vivid imagination. They are a distinct cognitive mode. During REM, the brain activates the visual cortex, motor cortex, limbic system, and memory systems, while largely deactivating the prefrontal cortex, which governs rational self-editing. The result is a cognitive environment without the internal critic. Problems can be explored without the usual penalty for wrong thinking. Neuroimaging studies show that emotional and associative regions dominate the dreaming brain, in patterns closely resembling neural activity in highly creative waking states. The dreaming brain is not irrational. It is operating by a different set of rules. Rules that favor novelty, metaphor, and unexpected combination over precision. Auguste Kekulé's discovery of the benzene ring structure in 1865 is one of the most documented examples of dream-assisted problem-solving in science. After years of struggling with benzene's molecular structure, Kekulé reported dreaming of a snake eating its own tail. On waking, he recognized that benzene must be a closed ring, not an open chain. While historians have examined the story carefully, Kekulé himself consistently attributed the breakthrough to a hypnagogic state between sleep and waking. The organic chemistry field was transformed, and the mechanism, a mind free of linear constraint, producing an image that solved a spatial puzzle, fits precisely what neuroscience now understands about how the sleeping brain processes structural problems. The sleeping brain uses sharp wave ripples to transfer information from the hippocampus to the neocortex. These are bursts of electrical activity lasting 80 to 100 milliseconds that occur repeatedly during slow wave sleep. Each ripple carries a compressed replay of a recently encoded experience. Researchers at University College London found in 2024 that the sequence of replay is not random. The brain prioritizes memories flagged as emotionally significant during waking hours. Problems that caused frustration, curiosity, or anxiety are most likely to be replayed. The brain treats unresolved emotional tension as a signal worth revisiting. Your difficulty with a problem during the day increases the probability it will be addressed tonight. N1. The very first stage of sleep, lasting 1 to 7 minutes, has been identified as particularly linked to creative problem solving. N1 is characterized by slow rolling eye movements, reduced muscle tone, and theta waves at 4 to 8 Hz. Studies published in 2021 and confirmed in later replications showed that extending time in N1 without descending into deeper sleep increased insight, problem solving, upon waking. The brain in N1 has loosened its logical constraints, but has not yet entered the memory consolidation of deeper stages. It is a state of fluid associative thinking. Edison's steel balls kept him in exactly this zone. The answer, if it was there, was most likely found in those first few minutes. The default mode network is a set of brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, that activate when the brain is not focused on an external task. During waking, this network handles mind-wandering, self-referential thought, and future simulation. During sleep, it remains highly active, particularly in REM. Researchers now believe the default mode network during REM conducts a form of narrative simulation, running possible futures, testing solutions in simulated scenarios, integrating emotional experience with factual memory. The network that appears to do nothing during the day is among the most productive networks of the night. A 2024 study from the University of Geneva gave participants numerical problems with a hidden shortcut, a simple rule that made the entire task easy once seen. Participants who slept before a second attempt were more than twice as likely to find the shortcut as those who remained awake. Brain imaging taken during the night showed that participants who found the insight had stronger hippocampal to prefrontal connectivity during slow-wave sleep, suggesting the brain had been rehearsing the problem structure, gradually building the scaffolding for the sudden insight that followed. The aha moment in the morning was not random. It was prepared the night before. Sleep does not help all types of problems equally. Problems that require restructuring, seeing a familiar situation from a completely new angle, benefit most. Problems requiring simple recall benefit less. Problems involving emotional evaluation, such as interpersonal decisions or risk assessments, show some of the largest sleep benefits. This makes biological sense. Emotional problems are rarely solved by more information alone. They require the integration of memory, values, past experience, and projected consequence. Precisely the cross-network synthesis the sleeping brain performs. The problems hardest to solve while awake are often the ones most improved by a night's rest. Most of the cognitive work of sleep-dependent problem-solving happens during non-REM sleep, which produces fewer vivid dreams. Slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage, is largely dreamless. Yet, It is during this stage that the hippocampus most actively replays and transfers memories. REM sleep, which follows in cycles, then applies associative processing to the pre-consolidated material. The sequence matters. Slow-wave sleep sets the table. REM makes the connections. Deprivation of either stage impairs different aspects of the process. Slow-wave deprivation weakens consolidation. REM deprivation weakens creative synthesis. Both are needed. The full night is the full algorithm. Morning clarity. The sense that a problem seems simpler after sleep has a neurological basis. During sleep, the brain clears adenosine, a metabolic byproduct that accumulates during waking and contributes to mental fatigue. By morning, adenosine levels have largely cleared, restoring capacity for focused attention. But adenosine clearance alone does not account for the sense that the problem itself has changed. Neuroimaging shows the prefrontal cortex functions more efficiently after sleep, not only because fatigue chemicals have cleared, but because the underlying memory structures it is working with have been reorganized. The problem has not changed. The brain processing it has. The overnight effect refers to the consistent finding that performance on a newly learned skill improves after sleep, even without additional practice. Musicians, surgeons, chess players, and language learners all show this effect. Sleep-dependent gains in procedural memory can equal or exceed gains from several additional hours of waking practice. The mechanism involves the strengthening of synaptic connections during slow-wave sleep through long-term potentiation. The brain is practicing in the dark. The skill you worked on today is being rehearsed tonight while you rest. Not because you asked it to, because that is what the sleeping brain does with things it registered as worth keeping. The glymphatic system, described by researcher Maiken Nedergaard in 2013 and supported by subsequent studies, is thought to remove metabolic waste from the brain during sleep using cerebrospinal fluid flowing through channels around blood vessels. Researchers continue to investigate how this system works and the full extent of its role. But current evidence suggests glymphatic activity is most prominent during slow-wave sleep. The practical implication is straightforward. A brain operating with lower metabolic waste processes information with greater clarity. The brain solving a problem in the morning may be working in a cleaner environment than the brain that struggled with the same problem the evening before. Social and emotional problem solving, navigating difficult relationships, knowing how to respond to conflict, is particularly sensitive to sleep. A 2022 study at the University of California, Berkeley found that participants who slept before evaluating emotionally charged scenarios showed more nuanced and empathic responses than those who were sleep-deprived. The researchers attributed this to REM sleep's role in processing the emotional charge of memories, separating the alarm signal from the information. Sleep does not make difficult people easier, but it makes the brain better at working with difficulty. The morning conversation, after full rest, is held by a different version of the mind. Sleep consolidates not just what happened, but the meaning of what happened. During slow-wave sleep, the brain replays episodic memories, specific events. During REM, it extracts the semantic content, the underlying pattern or rule the event exemplifies. This separation of episode from meaning is foundational to how the brain builds abstract knowledge. A problem that seemed concrete and situational at the end of the day may feel more general and solvable in the morning because REM has done the abstraction work overnight. The specific obstacle has been converted into a category of obstacle. And categories are easier to work with because the brain already holds strategies for them. A 90-minute nap that includes both slow wave and REM sleep has been shown to produce meaningful improvement in creative insight tasks, comparable in some studies to a full night's sleep. Shorter naps of 20 to 30 minutes improve alertness and reduce cognitive fatigue, but produce less creative benefit. Research published in 2024 in Current Biology found that nap-dependent problem-solving gains were most pronounced in sleep-deprived individuals, suggesting the brain prioritizes restorative problem-solving functions when sleep debt has accumulated. Even the shortest, deliberate rest creates conditions more favorable than continuous waking effort. The brain takes what it is given. Historians of science have documented dozens of cases in which researchers reported key insights arriving after sleep or during hypnagogic states. Beyond Kekulé's Benson ring. These include Dmitri Mendeleev, who described dreaming of the periodic table arrangement, Otto Loewi, whose Nobel Prize for demonstrating chemical neurotransmission followed an experiment design he received in a dream, and Srinivasa Ramanujan, the Indian mathematician who attributed many of his most unusual theorems to visions in hypnagogic states. These accounts were not embellishments. They were descriptions of the brain doing what it does in transitional sleep states, connecting what has been learned to what has not yet been seen. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for latent inhibition, the automatic filtering of familiar stimuli as irrelevant. In waking life, this filtering is useful. It prevents cognitive overload, but it also prevents seeing familiar things in new ways. During REM sleep, latent inhibition is significantly reduced. The familiar becomes strange again. Existing knowledge is seen as if for the first time, without the label of already known. This is why dreams feature familiar people in unfamiliar situations, and known places with impossible architecture. The brain is genuinely re-examining what it thought it understood. And sometimes, in that re-examination, it finds something it missed the first time. The timing of when you think about a problem before sleep influences how the brain processes it overnight. A technique called targeted memory reactivation involves exposing sleepers to an auditory cue associated with a problem they worked on while awake. When the cue is played during slow-wave sleep, it triggers replay of the associated memory. Participants who received the cue showed better performance on the problem the next morning. Deliberately reviewing a problem, turning it over clearly in your mind just before bed, increases the probability the brain will address it during the night. The last thought before sleep is not just a farewell to the day. It is an assignment. Sleep deprivation selectively impairs creative performance, while leaving routine analytical performance relatively intact. A tired brain can still follow established procedures, retrieve facts, execute algorithms, but it struggles to form new connections, to see a problem from an angle it has not tried, to leap over the gap between what is known and what is needed. Studies consistently show this asymmetry. The specifically creative function of the mind, the function most needed when familiar approaches have failed, is the function most dependent on sleep. When the problem is one you have not solved before, the brain that slept is the brain most likely to find something new. After 25 facts, a pattern has emerged. The sleeping brain is not resting from the problem. It is working on it through systems that do not operate during waking hours. The hippocampus replays. The default mode network simulates. REM loosens the filters. Slow wave consolidates the pieces. Somewhere in that architecture, connections form that the waking mind could not reach. The question is not whether this happens. It does. Every night. What the next facts begin to follow is this. Can that process be guided? Can it be cultivated? And what gets in its way? Quietly, without announcement. In the lives of most people who carry their problems to bed and wake without answers. Right now, the prefrontal cortex that has been directing your thinking all day is beginning to step back. Not because you forced it, because you stopped feeding it. The question that just opened, why so many people carry problems to sleep and wake without answers, lives in exactly this gap. In what happens when the brain's best tool is never given the quiet it needs to run. Notice your breath slowing. The filtering system is loosening. The associative networks are beginning to take over. That is where the next fact begins. Now we continue. Sleep intention. Deliberately holding a specific problem in mind while following a pre-sleep relaxation protocol measurably increases insight. A 2022 study at the University of Freiburg asked participants to visualize their problem as an image rather than a verbal statement before sleep. Participants who used this protocol showed a 53% higher rate of insight solutions the following morning. The visualization component appeared critical. Problems encoded as images are processed more readily by the spatial and associative systems that dominate during sleep than problems encoded as sentences. The mind going to sleep speaks more fluently in pictures. The problem you imagine before sleeping is the one most likely to be solved. A full night of sleep contains 4 to 6 90-minute cycles. Early cycles are dominated by slow wave sleep, deep, restorative, heavy with memory consolidation. Later cycles, in the hours before natural waking, are dominated by REM, lighter, more active, saturated with associative processing. The creative benefits of sleep are weighted toward the end of the night. Cutting sleep short by even 90 minutes eliminates most of the final REM cycle. People who sleep 6 hours instead of 7.5 are not getting 80% of the sleep benefit. For the specifically creative, problem-solving functions of sleep, they may be getting closer to half. Acetylcholine plays a central role in the problem-solving function of sleep. During REM, acetylcholine is released at levels comparable to or higher than those in active waking. This promotes synaptic plasticity, the ability of neural connections to strengthen or change. Simultaneously, the near-total suppression of norepinephrine during REM removes the bias toward previously reinforced pathways. The result is a brain that is both highly plastic and relatively unbiased, capable of forming connections across previously unrelated networks. Research has shown that drugs which suppress acetylcholine release during REM reduce next-day performance on insight tasks. The chemistry of REM is the chemistry of the creative leap. Emotionally salient memories, those tagged with frustration, sadness, or anxiety, show stronger hippocampal replay during slow-wave sleep than neutral ones. But something happens during that replay. The emotional tag is gradually separated from the factual content. The memory is retained, but the charge is reduced. This process explains why problems that feel overwhelming at bedtime often feel more manageable in the morning. The facts of the situation have not changed, but the brain has spent the night detaching the alarm signal from the information. And alarm, it turns out, is one of the primary obstacles to clear thinking. The morning mind approaches the same problem with less resistance. The practice of keeping a notebook beside the bed to capture hypnagogic ideas is documented across cultures and creative traditions. In the hypnagogic state, the brain produces spontaneous imagery and associative chains at a rate extremely difficult to generate deliberately during full wakefulness. These fragments often feel like non sequiturs, but researchers who have collected and analyzed hypnagogic content find it frequently contains novel combinations drawn from the day's experience. Recombinations that could represent solutions to open problems. The notebook is not superstition. It is a way of catching what the brain produces in the transition that waking life immediately covers over. Language acquisition is strongly sleep-dependent. Infants and toddlers consolidate new words and grammatical structures almost entirely during sleep. The relationship extends into adult language use. Studies show that people who sleep between learning a new vocabulary item in a second language and being tested on it retain the item more than twice as well as those who stay awake. More notably, sleepers show better ability to use new words correctly in novel contexts, suggesting the brain has not simply stored the word, but integrated it into the larger semantic network. The problem of learning a language is being solved in part by sleep, not by study alone. Insight problems, those requiring a sudden perceptual shift rather than accumulation of information, show some of the most dramatic sleep benefits of any cognitive task. Studies consistently show participants who attempt insight problems after sleep perform significantly better than those who remain awake. The key variable appears to be REM, sleep duration. More REM is associated with more insight. The perceptual shift that insight requires. Seeing a familiar structure from a genuinely new angle is neurologically similar to the loosening of constraints that REM produces chemically. Sleep does not just rest the brain before the insight. It builds the conditions that make the insight structurally possible. The autonomic nervous system undergoes significant recalibration during sleep. During the day, unresolved problems maintain a low-level stress response. The sympathetic nervous system keeps the body in a state of readiness. During deep sleep, parasympathetic dominance takes over. Heart rate variability increases. Cortisol drops. Inflammatory markers decrease. The physical tension associated with an unresolved problem is a measurable physiological state. Sleep resolves it at the body level. The body that wakes after a full night is biologically less burdened by the problem than the body that carried it into sleep. The solution the next morning emerges from a calmer system. The brain uses sleep to complete a process called attribute weighting. When facing a complex decision, the waking brain focuses on the most immediately salient attributes, the most recent information, the most emotionally vivid consequence. During sleep, the brain revisits the decision, but applies a different weighting, drawing on deeper stores of relevant experience and values. A 2023 meta-analysis in sleep reviewed 19 studies on sleep and complex decision-making, finding that sleep-dependent decisions showed better alignment with participants' pre-stated values and long-term goals than decisions made under continuous wakefulness. The sleeping brain is not neutral. It is weighing what matters most to the person whose brain it is. The hippocampus indexes new experiences during waking, tagging them with time, place, and emotional context. During sleep, it performs what researchers call memory search, querying stored associations to find connections between recent experiences and older ones. This process is directly relevant to problem solving because most meaningful problems involve applying existing knowledge to new situations. The hippocampal search during sleep is not random. It is guided by the associative tags attached to recent memories. A problem involving people you care about will be connected during sleep to other memories of those people. The search is running. It began when you fell asleep. People who reported dreaming about a problem showed greater insight the following day, even when the dream did not contain an obvious solution. Research reviewed in a 2022 paper in Dreaming. The Journal of the Association for the Study of Dreams proposed that dreaming about a problem reduces emotional resistance to engaging with it, a kind of overnight desensitization. The problem that felt overwhelming becomes, through repeated dream exposure, more familiar, more approachable. The sleeping mind is not only solving, it is also making peace with the problem. The barrier to the solution is sometimes not lack of information. It is avoidance. Sleep slowly dissolves it. The solution delivered by sleep often arrives in the wrong format, as an image, a metaphor, a feeling, rather than a logical proposition. This is not a malfunction. It reflects the language of the associative systems that generated it. Kekule's Ouroboros was pointing towards circularity, a ring. The snake was a visual code for a topological property. The translation from image to scientific concept required his waking mind. The sleeping mind provided the structure. The waking mind recognized it. The two working together produced the insight that neither could have reached alone. The translation step is not trivial. It is where the work of the morning begins. The brain's problem-solving capacity during sleep can be cultivated through specific practices. Reviewing the problem before sleep in a relaxed, non-effortful way. Encoding it visually rather than verbally. Maintaining a regular sleep schedule that preserves late-night REM, and keeping a record of dreams and hypnagogic imagery to capture what would otherwise be lost on waking. None of these practices require special equipment or training. They require only a shift in how sleep is understood, from passive unconsciousness to active, guided cognition. The sleeping brain is a collaborator. Treating it as one changes what it can do with the problems you bring it. Virtually every human culture carries a version of sleep on it as folk wisdom, and the variations reveal different intuitions about what sleep does. In many East Asian traditions, the sleeping mind was believed to access knowledge unavailable to the waking self. In many indigenous American traditions, dreams were treated as communications from a different mode of intelligence requiring interpretation. Contemporary neuroscience uses different language, but the observation is converging. The sleeping mind operates by different rules than the waking mind, and those different rules make it capable of things the waking mind cannot do. Across cultures and centuries, the same observation holds. Something useful happens in sleep that cannot happen elsewhere. During waking hours, synaptic connections proliferate. Every new experience strengthens many connections simultaneously. If unchecked, this creates cognitive noise. Everything seems equally connected. No signal stands out. During slow-wave sleep, the brain selectively weakens less important connections through a process researchers call synaptic homeostasis. The peripheral associations accumulated during the day are pruned. The result is a morning brain with a restored signal-to-noise ratio. Important connections stand out more clearly. The problem you face after sleep is being perceived through a cleaner filter. This is not metaphor. It is a change in the literal architecture of the brain's signaling environment. The night is still soft around you, still carrying these questions through the quiet. Your breathing has changed since we began. The body is heavier now than when we started. Whatever is still moving in your mind, a question, a name, an unfinished thought, let it float. It does not need to be held. The brain is holding it already. Keep going slowly. There is more ahead, and less effort needed to hear it. A 2021 study from the Max Planck Institute found that individuals who slept before reviewing a conflict with another person showed improved ability to identify the other person's perspective. Sleep-dependent changes in the medial prefrontal cortex, involved in imagining another's mental state, showed increased activation and greater connectivity to the amygdala in the post-sleep group. The brain had been processing the social problem through the lens of empathy rather than defensiveness. The conflict that felt intractable at night had become a perspective problem by morning. Perspective problems tend to have solutions. The sleeping brain moves defensiveness toward understanding without being asked. Chronic stress changes the architecture of slow-wave sleep, even in people who report sleeping through the night. Research published in 2023 in Biological Psychiatry found that the slow oscillations of deep sleep, the waves that coordinate hippocampal replay, are shorter, shallower, and less coordinated in stressed individuals. The hippocampus replays memories, but the neocortex receives them less cleanly. Consolidation is incomplete. The problem remains fragmented. Addressing the stress is, in a neurological sense, addressing the quality of the problem-solving that sleep can perform. The two are not separate concerns. One directly determines the depth of the other. Some early research suggests that body position during sleep may have a modest effect on dream content, though the evidence remains mixed and studies have been small. Right-side sleepers, in some studies, reported more positive dream content. Back sleepers showed higher rates of vivid visual dream content. These differences have been hypothesized to relate to the orientation of the brain relative to cardiovascular and vestibular systems. None of these effects are well established enough to draw firm conclusions. What they suggest is that the physical environment of sleep, even subtle aspects of posture, may not be entirely neutral to the cognitive environment of the night. The brain's problem-solving during sleep is not always symbolic. Sometimes it is strikingly literal. Paul McCartney described waking with the melody of Yesterday fully formed, initially assuming he must have heard it somewhere. After checking with friends and finding no prior source, he wrote it down. Mathematicians have awakened with proofs, scientists with experimental designs, engineers with structural solutions. In these cases, the brain appears to have completed an open task during sleep and delivered the result at waking. Some researchers point to the hypnopompic state, the transition from sleep to waking, as the moment when completed solutions surface into conscious access. The delivery happens at the boundary. Sleep deprivation specifically impairs cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between different strategies when a current approach is failing. A 2022 study in the Journal of Sleep Research found sleep-deprived participants showed a consistent tendency to perseverate, to continue applying an old rule even after it was clearly failing. Cognitive flexibility was impaired at twice the rate of basic attention deficits. The tired brain does not just solve problems more slowly. It gets stuck. It repeats failed approaches. The quality of the strategy itself is diminished. Sleep is not only fuel. It is the capacity to recognize when something is not working and try something different. The amygdala shows dramatically different activity patterns in sleeping versus waking states. During waking, it responds to threat signals and activates the stress response, narrowing focus and biasing cognition toward defensive strategies. During REM sleep, the amygdala is highly active, but in the absence of the stress neurochemicals that accompany waking activation, REM allows the brain to reprocess emotionally activating experiences without triggering a full stress response. This function has been described by sleep researcher Matthew Walker as overnight therapy. Though it is worth noting, this is a simplified popularization of a more complex process. The emotional problem brought to sleep is encountered again during REM, but in a neurochemical environment that permits it to be seen without alarm. Animals demonstrate sleep-dependent problem-solving, suggesting the mechanism evolved long before human language and abstract thought. Rats trained on a maze show clear hippocampal replay during slow-wave sleep. The exact sequence of place cells activated during maze running is replayed during sleep at roughly 10 times the speed of the original experience. Rats allowed to sleep after maze training perform significantly better the following day than those kept awake. Birds show comparable evidence of song-learning consolidation during sleep. The problem-solving function of sleep is ancient. It was not invented by the complex human brain. It was inherited from hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary selection that kept it because it worked. A small but growing body of research, including studies from the University of Bern, published in 2023, found that trained lucid dreamers who introduced problem prompts into their dreams, asking themselves, within the dream, to work on a specific challenge, showed higher rates of next-day insight on those challenges than non-lucid dreamers. The effect size was modest but statistically reliable. Lucid dreaming is difficult to achieve reliably and requires significant practice. but it represents a narrow window through which the waking self can communicate with the problem-solving architecture of the sleeping brain. The line between dreamer and director in this state becomes permeable. Open-ended questions, framed as how might or what would it look like if, produced more productive dream content related to a problem than closed questions framed as what is the answer to. The open framing engages the associative, generative mode of the sleeping brain rather than the search and retrieve mode. An open question is an invitation. A closed question is a demand. The sleeping brain responds more generously to invitations, going to sleep holding genuine wonder rather than a frustrated demand for an answer, sets different machinery in motion. The posture of the question before sleep shapes the quality of the processing during it. Halfway through, a deeper question takes shape. The first 50 facts have established what the sleeping brain does with problems. It replays, reorganizes, associates, prunes, and simulates. What they have not fully addressed is why so many people wake without the sense of progress. The answer is not that the process failed. More often, the conditions for the process were never fully established. The stress was too high, the sleep too short, the problem too tightly held. The second half follows the conditions that allow the sleeping brain's problem-solving to fully express itself, and the surprisingly simple reasons why the answer is often already assembled, waiting in a form we have not yet learned to recognize. What just opened? The question of why the answer is often already there, assembled in the dark, unrecognized, is not only a neuroscience question. You may be carrying that right now. A problem that has been with you long enough that the brain has almost certainly worked on it. But the conditions that would let the answer surface have not quite been in place. This is not a failure of effort. It is a question of environment. Notice your body now, softer than when we began. The conditions are already changing. The second half of tonight follows what those conditions are and what it takes to let them happen. Now we continue. Temperature is the most well-documented environmental factor affecting sleep quality. The brain initiates sleep more readily and maintains deeper sleep stages when core body temperature drops. A natural circadian process aided by a cool sleeping environment. Research consistently points to a room temperature between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit as optimal. In warmer environments, slow-wave sleep is shorter and more fragmented, reducing the depth of hippocampal replay. The problem-solving architecture of sleep depends, practically, on the physical environment being cool enough for the brain to descend into its most productive stages. A small adjustment in room temperature is a small adjustment in the quality of the thinking available tomorrow. Blue light exposure before sleep delays melatonin release by the pineal gland, postponing the brain's entry into the first sleep stage. The consequence is not only shorter total sleep, but compression of the early slow-wave stages that dominate the first half of the night. Since slow-wave sleep is most responsible for hippocampal memory consolidation, blue light at night specifically impairs the first layer of problem-solving that sleep performs. The REM that follows is working with less well-consolidated material. The architecture of the night is disrupted at its foundation. The device used to scroll before sleep is reducing the quality of thinking available the next morning. Alcohol accelerates the onset of slow-wave sleep in the first half of the night, which many people interpret as evidence it helps sleep. But it suppresses REM throughout the night, and REM suppression is greatest in the second half, exactly when REM normally dominates. Studies of alcohol and overnight problem solving consistently show impairment even when participants report feeling they slept well. The sense of having slept is real. The cognitive work sleep was supposed to perform was not completed. The associative synthesis of REM was disrupted. The insight that might have arrived by morning did not. Regular aerobic exercise, at least 30 minutes, at moderate intensity on most days, measurably improves both slow-wave and REM sleep quality. A 2023 meta-analysis in Sleep Medicine Reviews found regular exercises showed deeper slow-wave sleep, longer REM cycles, and better performance on post-sleep cognitive tasks. Exercise increases slow wave amplitude by elevating BDNF, a growth factor that promotes synaptic plasticity. It reduces stress hormones that fragment slow wave sleep, and it regulates the circadian rhythm by providing a daily anchor for the body clock. The body that moves during the day sleeps more deeply and thinks more clearly the morning after. Tryptophan, an amino acid found in turkey, eggs, dairy, nuts, and seeds, is a precursor to both serotonin and melatonin, the systems that regulate sleep initiation and maintenance. A 2022 study in Nutrients found participants who consumed tryptophan-rich foods in the evening showed earlier melatonin onset and longer slow-wave sleep duration. More protein-rich evening meals were associated with better memory consolidation overnight. Highly processed carbohydrate-rich meals were associated with lighter, more fragmented sleep. The chemistry of the night begins with the chemistry of dinner. What the body is given in the evening shapes what the brain can do while the body rests. The circadian rhythm is a master regulator of cognitive function, including the specific modes associated with problem solving. Creative thinking peaks in the early morning for morning chronotypes and late evening for evening chronotypes. In both cases, immediately following the main sleep period. People operating against their natural chronotype show consistently lower creative performance and reduced insight problem solving. The pressure to conform to a single schedule has cognitive costs that are only beginning to be measured at a population level. When sleep is timed against the body's natural clock, the problem solving that follows is working at a disadvantage before it begins. Solutions arriving during mundane, automatic tasks, washing dishes, walking, showering, involve the same default mode network that drives REM processing. Both states share reduced prefrontal executive engagement, allowing associative networks to run without direction. The shower insight is a first draft. The sleep insight is a finished revision. Both emerge from the same underlying mechanism, the release of executive control. Sleep takes that release further than any waking activity can. The prefrontal cortex goes offline more completely. The associative networks run with less interference. The insight that comes from sleep has had more room to form than the one that arrived in the shower. Neural networks trained on supervised learning tasks improve when given rest periods, deliberate pauses with noise injection, in ways that partially mirror synaptic homeostasis in biological sleep. But the creative, associative synthesis of REM has not been replicated in any artificial system. Machine learning systems improve at defined tasks. They do not spontaneously form connections across unrelated knowledge domains the way the sleeping human brain does. As of 2026, the brain's capacity to generate genuine novel insight from sleep remains without a computational equivalent. What happens in the sleeping brain each night is still beyond the reach of the most sophisticated systems built to approximate it. Memory reconsolidation occurs during both waking and sleeping states, but with different consequences. When a memory is reactivated during waking, reconsolidation is vulnerable to interference. When reactivated during sleep, reconsolidation happens in a protected neurochemical environment. The suppressants of the sleep state prevent new interference from disrupting the process. Problems revisited during sleep are being updated, refined, and restored in a slightly modified form each time. The problem you wake to on a Tuesday is being processed by a brain that has been quietly refining its model every night since you first encountered it. It is not the same problem you went to sleep with on Monday. The brain solves problems not by accumulating detail, but by discarding the irrelevant and preserving the essential. A process sleep facilitates through synaptic pruning. What is forgotten during sleep is not random. The weakest associations are removed, leaving the core structure of the problem in sharper relief. People with excellent memory for problem details are sometimes worse at solving it than those with hazier recollection, because the detailed memory maintains the same framing, the same emotional charge. The sleeping brain's selective forgetting is a form of editing. And editing, in any domain, is often what turns something complicated into something clear. Dreams involving navigation, finding a path through a landscape, moving through changing spaces, are among the most commonly reported dream types across cultures. The hippocampus encodes both spatial maps and episodic memories using the same cognitive architecture. Navigation problems and memory problems are, at the neural level, the same kind of problem. When the hippocampus replays the day during slow-wave sleep, it runs through both spatial and episodic content simultaneously. The dream of finding your way through an unfamiliar place is the visible surface of the brain reorganizing its maps, both literal and figurative. When the path is found in the dream, something is being solved. The prefrontal cortex imposes order, sequence, and social appropriateness on thought. Its suppression during sleep is not a failure. It is a feature. What is produced in the absence of the editor is different thinking. Thinking that does not check itself against what has been tried before. What is considered feasible? This unchecked associative thinking is the raw material of innovation. The editor returns in the morning to evaluate what the free-ranging night mind produced. Most of it is discarded, but occasionally, what the dreaming mind found is exactly what the edited waking mind was unable to reach by trying. The editor and the dreamer need each other. Experts show greater sleep-dependent problem-solving gains than novices for certain problem types. Experts have larger, more richly connected knowledge networks, which means the hippocampal search conducted during sleep has more potential connections to find. A chess master's sleeping brain searches a larger territory than a beginner's. The patterns it identifies in the morning draw on years of encoded positions the beginner does not have. This does not make sleep less important for experts. It makes it more productive. The same sleeping architecture, applied to a richer knowledge base, produces richer results. Every year of learning is also an expansion of the territory the sleeping brain can explore. Scientists, mathematicians, and engineers frequently report ideas arriving at 3 or 4 in the morning, the heart of the final REM period. The ideas arrive with unusual clarity, as if the problem had been solved elsewhere and the solution was being reported to the waking self. This is neurologically accurate. The solution developed during REM in networks that do not require waking consciousness. The waking at 3 in the morning is not the solving. It is the notification. The work was done in the dark. Research published in 2022 in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals who kept regular dream journals showed improved dream recall, greater metacognitive awareness, and higher scores on creativity measures after 6 weeks of daily recording. The act of attending carefully to dream content trains the attentional systems to notice patterns that would otherwise be lost, not only in dreams, but in waking thought. The habit of listening to the night mind makes the day mind more perceptive. The journal is both a record and a practice, a way of taking seriously the cognitive work the sleeping brain has been doing all along, without waiting to be recognized for it. The period between giving up on a problem and returning to it the next morning is not wasted time. It is processing time. During incubation with sleep, the brain is actively working. During wakeful rest of the same duration, the benefit is significantly reduced. Studies comparing outcomes after overnight sleep, wakeful rest, and active waking found that overnight sleep produced the most improvement by a clear margin. The decision to stop working on a problem and return to it in the morning is not surrender. It is the activation of a more powerful processor. Stopping is not the opposite of solving. Sometimes it is the beginning of it. Intuition, knowing something without knowing exactly how, has been increasingly identified as the output of implicit learning. Knowledge encoded in neural patterns, not accessible to conscious reflection, but influencing judgment and decision-making nonetheless. Sleep plays a central role in consolidating implicit learning. The sleeping brain processes patterns below the level of conscious awareness and integrates them into the body of implicit knowledge. When intuition signals that something is wrong or right, it is drawing on this sleeping-built archive. The gut feeling was not invented in the moment it surfaced. It was assembled across many nights, in the quiet, without announcement. Sleep-deprived teams perform worse on complex creative tasks than well-rested individuals working alone. Research in this area found that sleep deprivation impaired the social coordination mechanisms that make group work valuable. The capacity to build on each other's ideas, to notice when a colleague reached a useful insight, to maintain a shared model of the problem. The benefit of working in a group depends on the individual members' brains working well. And the brains work well only when the night has been given its due. The group's collective intelligence is, in a meaningful sense, the average of the sleep quality of its members. Dreams with positive emotional content, joy, curiosity, wonder, are associated with better performance on convergent tasks. Those with a single correct answer, in the morning. Dreams with mildly negative content, mild frustration, searching, are associated with better performance on divergent tasks, requiring multiple creative possibilities. The emotional quality of a dream appears to reflect the specific neural process being run. Positive states indicate a consolidation mode. Mildly negative states indicate an exploratory, generative mode. The brain is choosing its tool for the night based on the type of work still open. The mood of the dream is not incidental. It is information. The feeling of being close to a solution, a sense of warmth, something just out of reach, corresponds to the activation of neural patterns associated with the solution, without full hippocampal to prefrontal transmission of the complete memory. The connection has not yet fully surfaced. Sleep, particularly the transition to and from sleep, facilitates this final surfacing. The feeling of being almost there at night may mean exactly what it seems to. The brain is on the edge of a connection it has not yet completed. Sleeping on it is not giving up. It is giving the incomplete process the time and neurochemical environment to finish what it started. Moderate cortisol in the morning, from the natural cortisol awakening response, enhances focus and analytical function. But cortisol elevated during sleep, due to chronic stress or unresolved conflict, fragments slow-wave sleep and impairs hippocampal function. The timing of cortisol matters. The body is designed to produce it in the morning as a waking signal. When it is elevated all night, the problem-solving architecture of sleep runs under interference. Managing the stress of the day is, in a practical, neurological sense, an investment in the quality of the night's work. The two are not separate. The day's emotional residue directly shapes the depth of the night's processing. Targeted memory reactivation, delivering auditory cues associated with a specific problem during slow-wave sleep, triggers preferential hippocampal replay of the associated memory. In problem-solving applications, this technique has been used to guide the sleeping brain toward open questions, with measurable increases in next-day insight. The results suggest sleep processing is not entirely passive. It can be nudged towards specific problems. Future applications may allow people to more deliberately direct the brain's overnight problem-solving resources. What has been an unconscious process throughout human history is beginning to become something that can be intentionally shaped. The association of long sleep with laziness and the badge of honor attached to working through the night has cognitive costs that can be measured. A society that undersleeps, underthinks, specifically in the creative, associative, and empathic registers that sleep protects. Researchers studying periods of high cultural productivity have noted they tend to occur in communities that valued and protected sleep. The correlation is imperfect, but the suggestion is worth holding. The quality of a civilization's thinking may be related, in part, to the quality of its sleep. The night is not time taken from life. It is part of the infrastructure of a thinking mind. During hypnopompia, the transition from sleep to waking, the brain is emerging from its final REM cycle, with the night's associative work still briefly accessible. The contents of the final dream, the feelings that linger, the fragments of imagery, these are the residue of the night's processing. Many of the most useful insights reported by creative professionals arrive in this window, in the first minutes after waking, before full executive function re-engages. The phone, the alarm, the immediate business of the day, all terminate this window. A few quiet minutes in the transition are not idle. They are the harvest of everything the night assembled. Here, at the 3/4 mark, the shape of what sleep does becomes clear. The sleeping brain is the most sophisticated problem-solving system available to any human being. It runs every night without instruction. It works on what matters most to the person whose brain it is. It has been doing this since before language, before anyone had a word for it. The remaining facts carry a different quality, the deeper truth beneath the mechanism. What it means to trust a process you cannot see, and rest knowing the answer is being assembled in the dark. Your brain has been replaying today while you've been listening. Not your whole day. The parts that mattered. The parts that were tagged as unfinished. You don't need to direct that. You don't need to remember it in the morning. You only need to let the body grow heavier. Let the breath continue at whatever pace it finds. The processing that needs to happen tonight is already happening. It doesn't need you awake for it. We're almost there now. The morning after deep sleep is different in kind from the morning after restless sleep. Not just in how you feel, in what you can think. Studies measuring cognitive flexibility and creative insight after full versus disrupted sleep show differences in the first hour of the day. The disrupted sleeper has the same facts, the same experience, but the connections are less available. The insight waiting just below the surface does not surface. The full sleeper is not smarter. They are simply in better contact with their own mind. The default mode network is also associated with imagination, self-reflection, and considering future possibilities. Its activity during sleep and during waking mind wandering are neurologically similar. The same faculty that allows imagining a future while awake is the faculty the sleeping brain uses to work on unresolved problems. People who spend time in undirected reflection, who allow the mind to wander, show enhanced sleep-dependent problem-solving. The waking mind that knows how to be quiet is the sleeping mind that knows how to solve. One trains the other. A 2022 study found that participants who spent 5 minutes writing about things they were grateful for before bed fell asleep faster and spent more time in slow-wave sleep. Gratitude activates the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces cortisol, creating conditions for deeper sleep. The night that begins in recognition of what was good, what held, is different from the night that begins still braced against the day. The brain that enters sleep at rest does different work than the brain still defending. The hippocampus automatically activates associated networks when it receives a partial cue, a fragment of a memory, a piece of a problem. During sleep, this pattern completion operates without executive constraints. Incomplete problems are completed in simulation. Partial solutions are extended. The fragment you fall asleep holding is already being completed. Not by will, by the architecture of the hippocampus doing what it has always done, finishing the pattern, filling in what is missing, reaching for the shape that the partial form implies. Writers who sleep between drafts produce higher quality revisions. Sleep removes the attachment to the current form. The writer reading their work the morning after sees it more as a reader. The emotional investment in particular phrasings has been partially dissolved by REM processing. The distance needed for genuine revision, seeing what is not working, is partly a gift of sleep. Any problem that requires seeing the current version clearly enough to change it benefits from the overnight distance. A 2023 study found that sleep-deprived participants applied moral rules more rigidly and demonstrated less capacity for situational analysis. Well-rested participants showed greater integration of emotional, contextual, and rule-based factors in judgment. Moral problems. How to act when values conflict, when people are hurt, are among the most complex humans face. The wisdom difficult situations require is not stored somewhere and retrieved. It is assembled in the moment, by a brain that needs sleep to assemble it well. Sleep enables chunking, the compression of multiple procedural steps into a single intuitive unit. When learning a multi-step procedure, the waking brain tracks each step explicitly. After sleep, the procedure becomes a single flowing action. Research on musicians, surgeons, and mathematicians shows the same overnight transformation. The explicit becomes implicit. What was difficult becomes obvious. This is not forgetting the steps. It is integrating them so deeply they no longer need conscious tracking. The problem that required effort becomes something closer to recognition. Sleep is how effortful becomes effortless. The hours with the highest density of REM sleep, just before natural waking, are the hours most commonly cut short by alarms. The most problem-solving rich portion of the night is systematically eliminated from people who wake significantly earlier than their natural time. The alarm does not just cut the night short. It cuts the specific phase that does the creative work. Sleep researchers have argued this structural feature of modern life represents one of the largest preventable losses of cognitive capacity. For many people, the alarm is the problem. The brain consolidates tacit knowledge during sleep, the knowledge that cannot be put into words. How to read a situation, how to find the right word, how to comfort someone. This kind of knowledge lives in procedural and implicit memory systems, consolidated during slow wave and early REM. The most important professional and personal problems often involve tacit knowledge. These capacities are not improved by more information. They are improved by sleep, which works on the underlying systems that carry them. The expertise that feels like instinct was built across many nights of quiet consolidation. The insight gained during sleep is often accompanied by certainty, a feeling that the solution is correct, not just plausible. This corresponds to activation of reward circuits associated with correct pattern completion, including the nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental area. The brain flags its own successful solutions with dopamine. The aha feeling is the brain's signal that the pattern is complete. The certainty that accompanies the morning insight is the night's final gift. Not just the answer, but the confidence to act on it. Sleep architecture changes across the lifespan. Adolescents experience genuine circadian shifts while being required by school schedules to wake earlier, resulting in REM deprivation during peak years of associative learning. Older adults show reduction in slow wave amplitude with consequences for memory consolidation. Middle-aged adults, managing the most complex problems, show stable sleep architecture, but are most likely to sacrifice sleep for productivity. The period of life with the most difficult problems is also the period most likely to cut the problem-solving sleep short. The sleeping brain produces solutions the waking brain would not have considered, not because it is more capable, but because it operates without prior constraints. Waking cognition is bounded by what has worked before. The dreaming brain is bounded only by the associations it can form. When morning brings an idea that seems strange, the useful response is translation, asking what structural insight the idea is pointing toward, what constraint it has dissolved that the waking mind accepted without question. The strange idea may be the door. During slow-wave sleep, muscle tension drops to near zero. The proprioceptive signals that normally occupy processing capacity, monitoring posture, balance, tension, are largely suspended. This frees resources redirected to internal processing. The brain during deep sleep devotes more of itself to thinking than the waking brain can, because the waking brain must simultaneously manage the body's interaction with the world. The stillness of sleep is not emptiness. It is a reallocation. The resources that maintain the body's position in space are reassigned to the work of the night. The most productive periods in a creator's life tend to be accompanied by the most vivid dream life. The relationship is likely bidirectional. The engaged waking mind produces more material for the sleeping brain to work with, and the sleeping brain's processing enriches waking associative capacity. Creativity and deep sleep feed each other. The engaged life produces the rich night. The rich night enables the engaged life. The people with the most ideas are often sleeping most deeply, not despite their productivity, but as part of it. Unfinished problems should be named before sleep. Not analyzed, not worried over, named. A single clear statement of what remains open. The act of naming without grasping, placing the problem before the sleeping mind and releasing the effort, is both a psychological and neurological practice. The brain takes explicit, emotionally tagged, uncompleted tasks more seriously than vague background anxiety. Name the thing, then sleep. The naming is the handoff. What happens next does not require you to be awake for it. Human beings appear to be the only animals known to construct narrative stories while dreaming. Researchers propose this embeds problems in a causal structure, a beginning, a middle, an implied resolution that reconfigures them as followable rather than formless. The dreaming brain is not associating randomly. It is building a story that makes sense of what is unresolved. The dream narrative transforms a fog into a sequence. And sequences, unlike fogs, have directions. And directions can be followed. Experienced meditators showed better performance on insight problems after sleep, and their sleep architecture showed greater slow-wave amplitude and longer REM cycles. In a 2022 study, the proposed mechanism is that meditation trains attentional systems to disengage from rumination, the repetitive reviewing of problems that otherwise fragment sleep. The mind that can set a thought down while awake is also better at setting it down when it is time to sleep. The two practices reinforce each other. Stillness during the day deepens stillness during the night. The sleeping brain connects different domains of knowledge, combining concepts from one field with structures from another. All the great associative leaps in human thinking involve the kind of cross-domain connection the REM brain specializes in. The brain during sleep does not know what category a piece of knowledge belongs to. It knows only structure, emotional tag, and connections. Category crossing is not a mistake in the sleeping brain. It is the standard mode of operation. This is where original thinking originates. Research tracking professional problem solvers over several years found that the strongest predictor of breakthrough was not experience, deliberate practice, or measured intelligence. It was sleep consistency, maintaining a regular schedule with adequate duration across the study period. The professionals who slept well were more likely to have the kind of original insight that changed the direction of their work. Not on any particular day, but across their careers. The breakthrough was built in the years of nights, not in the single heroic effort, but in the accumulated work. Everything covered tonight points toward the same place. You do not have to solve it tonight. The problem you carried here is waiting for the patient machinery of your sleeping brain to do what it does every night, without your help, without your approval. Your work tonight is only to rest. The answer being assembled in the dark does not need to be hurried. It needs to be trusted. Trust, it turns out, is the only thing it ever asked of you. The problems most worth solving are rarely solved in a single night. They are worked on across many nights, each sleep adding association, pruning what is peripheral, deepening what matters. The brain returns to the same question repeatedly, each time with slightly different connections. What feels like no progress is often invisible work accumulating. The answer that arrives one morning formed across many nights, each contributing something the conscious mind never witnessed. Patience is not resignation. It is the accurate understanding of how the process works. The relationship between sleep and wisdom is one of the least studied dimensions of sleep research. Wisdom requires connecting what is known to what has been lived, weighing competing values, holding complexity without forcing resolution. These are the capacities that sleep's cross-domain, emotionally integrative processing supports. The older person, who seems to know what to do in difficult situations, is drawing on a lifetime of nights. The answer comes quickly, because the sleeping brain has been preparing for it across years. Forgiveness, the releasing of held injury, shows a measurable relationship with sleep. Those who sleep well show greater capacity for perspective-taking and emotional flexibility in conflict. These are two capacities most necessary for forgiveness to become possible. Sleep does not automatically produce forgiveness, but it builds the conditions in which forgiveness can form. The loosening of rigid attribution, the softening of the alarm signal attached to a memory, the ability to hold another's experience alongside your own. The night has a relationship with the unsolvable that the day does not. During waking, the unsolvable creates distress. During sleep, the brain engages with unresolved material without requiring resolution to continue. The hippocampus replays without conclusion. The default mode network simulates without a decision. This engagement, without demand, is not available to the waking mind. It is one of the rarest things the night provides. the capacity to keep working on something without needing it to be finished. The night is patient. In the end, the brain that solves is not the one that tried hardest. It is the one that rested deepest. The great breakthroughs born from dreams were the product of minds that filled themselves with a question, then trusted the dark enough to let it go. The dream is not where the mind escapes the problem. It is where the mind finally meets it without pressure, without noise. Rest is not the opposite of finding the answer. Rest is how the answer finds you. If tonight brought something toward a problem you have been carrying, if these facts gave the brain something to work with while you sleep, a quiet subscribe, a gentle like, lets another searching mind find its way here. One quiet tab, one sleepy soul at a time. The brain was working on the problem before you knew there was a method for it. Every night, regardless of whether you understood the mechanism, regardless of whether you trusted the process, the norepinephrine fell, the hippocampus replayed, the filters of the prefrontal cortex loosened, and the associations the day had no room for began to form in the dark. It was always running. You didn't have to earn it. You only had to stop long enough to let it go. The answer you wake with tomorrow was not found tomorrow. It was assembled tonight, in the quiet, while the part of you that insists on solving was finally allowed to rest. The problem-solving playlist has been following this territory, one mechanism at a time. The next video moves into the part of the map that tonight only pointed toward. That video is waiting whenever you are ready. The associations are still forming now, quietly, without your direction. Let your breath slow to the pace that belongs to the dark. If sleep comes, let it carry you into the part of the work that needed you to stop first. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Rest well. Searching one. The answer does not need you to be awake for it to arrive. Where curiosity ends and sleep begins. Good night.